Alright, fine, I get it. You guys want a gunline? I'll give you a goddamn gunline. Hello again, my little state troops, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. Now, a few months ago, I did a tournament after action report where I said I took an Empire gunline to a tournament. But you guys didn't think it was a real Empire gunline. There was far too many melee troops in the army. And so, you know what? You guys were right. I needed to bring the full might of Nuln, the full might of the Empire's black powder weaponry to the fight. And so today we're going to be doing another after action report. And this time I brought all of the guns. And so without further ado, let's make ready, take aim, and fire ourselves right into today's episode. Attention conscripts, I am excited to announce the launch of the official second Mordian Glory channel. If you're curious, click on the link down in the description and head over to Mordian Glory Games. I upload to the channel several times a week with all sorts of fun and silly gaming content. So if you're jonesing for even more Mordian Glory content, then head on over to Mordian Glory Games and don't forget to subscribe. As is tradition, I want to start off by saying a couple of thank yous. Firstly, I want to say a big thank you to the tournament organizer and hosts of this tournament, which was Just Play. Just Play is my local game store, and they run regular events for all sorts of game systems every single month. They do Old World, they do 40k, they do Heresy, and they do a variety of card games as well, such as Magic the Gathering. It's a really good local store, and if you ever find yourself in Liverpool, I highly recommend that you check it out. I also want to say a big thank you to all of my opponents, because I had 3 fantastic games at this tournament. And in truth, a tournament is a very social event, and whether you have a good time or a bad time often depends on the attitude of your opponents. And I can safely say that all of my opponents in this event were fantastic, and they made the event really, really fun. But with that said, now let's get into the video proper, and we will start with the list overview. As per usual, I have created a separate video going through the fine detail and the nitty-gritty of the army list that I was running, and you can find a link to that down in the description below. But I'll give you a brief summary of it all now. Starting off with the characters, we have 3 level 4 wizards. Every single one of them going for battle magic. Yep, that's right. We are looking to spam out Fireball and Pillar of Fire. One of these wizards is going to be the general of the army, and that wizard is going to also have the Lore Familiar. In addition to the wizards, we have got 3 Empire Engineers with no upgrades whatsoever. Their job is just to hide out of line of sight and provide their Engineer reroll to any war machines nearby. Moving on to the core, the Infantry Corps. We have got 4 units of Empire Missile State Troops. Yes, 4. I know some of you might be thinking, but what about the rule of 3? Don't worry, this tournament in the rules pack said that the rule of 3 applied to everything that wasn't core, and for anything that was core, it was the rule of 6. The first 2 units of these state troops are going to have crossbows. The second 2 units are going to have handguns. All of the squads are 20 man strong. All of the squads have been upgraded with a sergeant who has got a repeater handgun. That covers all of the infantry and characters, but now it's time to get to the real boom boom, the war machines. In my special selection, I had 3 great cannons, the full battery of Sigmar's might. I also had a mortar in there. Truthfully, the mortar was just there for the theme of the list, and also because I had about 90 points left over, and I figured I've got a mortar painted up, I might as well put it in. The other reason was last time I ran a mortar, it blew itself up every single game, and it kind of put me off it. So I wanted to give the mortar another chance to prove that it isn't totally useless. The last two war machines are arguably my favorite war machines in all of Old World. I had double Hellblaster volley gun. So in total, we have got 6 war machines. This isn't Boomtown anymore. This is Boom City. But that just about covers the army. Now let's have a look at the lay of the land. What was this tournament all about? What was the format and how competitive was it? So it was a local 3-round RTT. Each round was 2 hours and 45 minutes, and scoring was done based on the rulebook. So you had to beat your opponent by more than 100 points in order to get the victory. As for the terrain, it used the square-based tournament terrain pack, and for board size, we were on the 60 by 44, not the full 6 by 4 boards. This is actually a bit of a disadvantage to me because it meant that I couldn't spread my troops out as much, and if I'd been on a full 6 by 4, I probably could have got another 15 infantry firing from the get-go, and it also meant that my deployment zone wasn't as deep, meaning that I had to deploy on the line if I wanted to avoid any scenarios where I get physically pushed off the board by a fallback in good order or fleeing. As for the competitiveness of the event, I would describe it as semi-competitive to regular competitive. There were a few players there who were going to their first tournament, although they had all played some practice games. There were a few players there who had all been to at least one tournament before, either at Just Play or at another place, and who had a pretty good amount of experience under the belt. And then there were a few players at the top end who had been to lots of old tournaments and in fact had won Old World RTTs previously. So a good spread overall. And this spread of competitiveness also extended to the factions that were being run, and we had everything from Skaven, which are considered a little bit of a weak faction, up to Wood Elves and Tomb Kings, which are both considered very good factions. But now let's get to the real reason you guys are all here, the meat and potato of this video. Let's get into the games, and we'll start with the first battle. In this game, I was playing against James and his dwarves on the classic open battle scenario. In the dwarf army, there was a king loaded up for combat, a runesmith with 3 runes of spell breaking, and then there was a thane who was the battle standard bearer who had the master rune of Grugny, giving him that sweet 5+ ward save, and everyone in his unit that 5+ ward save. But he's also really good at shooting as well, because he had this gun which allowed you to fire twice, and then if it hit you, it did 2d3 hits. So actually quite a surprising amount of firepower coming from that one model. There was a unit of Longbeards with hand weapon and shields. There was a unit of 14 rangers. We then had a cannon, 2 gyrocopters, a unit of 14 hammerers, and then there was a unit of iron drakes and an organ gun. For deployment, I put all of my state troops in a really big long line. Starting from the left, it went crossbow, handguns, crossbows, and then on my right flank, I had 3 cannons and a volley gun on a hill with a mortar behind the hill. I had my wizards spread out throughout the army, and then I had another volley gun in the center. For the dwarves, they had a gyrocopter on each flank. On the left flank, they had their artillery on the hill, and then in the middle, they had everything else with their iron drakes and their longbeards and their hammerers, with the hammerers being in a marching column. And then they scouted forward their rangers because I measured it out and I made sure that the rangers couldn't get behind me because I've made that mistake before. With everything down, it was time for the first turn, and the Empire won the roll-off. This is because I actually have very few drops. In fact, my entire army is only 6 drops, 4 state troops, all the war machines, all the characters. And so I actually had the +1 to the roll-off every single game. Now, my initial turn was essentially spent clearing out the rangers because they had been deployed in a way to essentially block a lot of my shooting onto the units behind, especially with things like my volley gun that's not on the hill and my state troops. So I end up putting 2 units of state troops, 1 handguns and 1 crossbows, and the volley gun into the Rangers, and I put another volley gun into the Rangers as well, and I wiped them down to just 2. One of the volley guns did amazingly, one of the volley guns did basically nothing, but that's why I brought 2 of them, because essentially they balance each other out because they're quite swingy weapons. Elsewhere, one of my cannons fired into the gyrocopter on the right flank and flattened it, and the other 2 cannons went after the longbeards. I was able to kill one of the longbeards with one of the cannonballs, and the other cannonball clipped one guy, but James made his 5+ ward. Last thing to mention is over on the left flank, I moved forward a unit of handgunners and fired at the cannon. Even though I was hitting on like 6s followed by 4s, I was still able to kill one of the crew. And then I fired all of my crossbows at the gyrocopter on the left flank, but didn't do any damage to it. One big mistake I did make in this first turn is I just completely forgot to use my pillars of fire. Just didn't even cast them. But fortunately, it wasn't a major issue, as they wouldn't have been really in range of anything in the first turn anyway. So with Empire turn 1 down, it was time to go into the first turn for the Dwarves. The gyrocopter on the left powered forward and sprayed its clatter gun into my unit of crossbowmen and managed to kill one of them. The organ gun on the hill fired but got a misfire and was only able to kill 1 more crossbowman. And then the cannon fired but also got a misfire, and it ended up not being able to shoot for a couple of turns. In the middle, the Iron Drakes came forward and fired into the handgunners and were able to kill one of them. And then the Longbeards and the Ironbreakers marched forward, but they're dwarves, so they didn't get very far. The 2 Rangers stayed still and fired into the crossbows, but unfortunately both rolled a 2 to hit, therefore not getting any hits. Going into battle round 2, and the Empire firepower actually peters out. I like to think that because of all of the smoke that had been unleashed in the first turn, maybe there was a bit of line of sight issues, but essentially I fire my handguns and my crossbows into the Iron Drakes, and I think I even put like a fireball into them as well, and I'm only able to kill 4 of them, and the Trollhammer torpedo guy actually sticks around. I then fire my volley gun into the remaining 2 dwarf Rangers and kill like 1 of them. That's it. But it's not all bad, because I am able to fire my cannons and I'm able to fire some fireballs into the hammerers, and I start whittling them down. Over on the left flank, I fire my crossbows and my handguns into the gyrocopter, but unfortunately I'm only able to do 1 wound to it. This means that when we get into Dwarf turn 2, all I've really killed in that turn is like a Ranger, a Hammerer or 2, and then a wound to a Gyrocopter. It was a really, really lackluster turn 2, guys. Sensing a potential break in the Empire firepower, the Dwarves continue to push forward grimly. At the start of the Dwarf turn, my Pillars of Fire started moving. I had successfully cast them in my turn 2. One of them only goes an inch and just sort of sits in front of the Longbeards. The other one goes through the unit of Hammerers, but essentially does no damage to them. Things continue to go well for the Dwarves when the lone Iron Drake with his Trollhammer torpedo absolutely flattens the Hellblaster volley gun that was not on the hill. And this reminds me, in my turn 2, one of my cannons had actually misfired twice, even with the Empire reroll, and had blown itself up. So actually in turn 2, the Dwarves were able to get rid of 2 of my war machines. We also take some more casualties from the organ gun on the handgunners on the left flank, and the gyrocopter was able to get a charge off into the crossbows on the left flank as well. I did stand and shoot with the crossbows, and I did manage to do a wound to the gyrocopter, but it's not looking good, in theory, for those crossbows, because gyrocopters, they're almost perfectly designed for taking down these missile troops, right? But then the gyrocopter completely fluffs. The impact hits do nothing. It misses with both of its attacks, and the Empire State Troops don't really do any damage in return, but due to the fact that we'd done a wound on stand and shoot, plus we were close order, plus we had an extra rank, we actually managed to see off the gyrocopter, and it actually ends up rolling an 11 on its break test and just completely flees. I try and pursue it, but I am unsuccessful, and it does manage to get away. We go into Empire turn 3, and unfortunately for the diggy hole guys, the Empire's luck turns around. First thing that happens is my pillar of fire goes through the hammerers and the rangers and manages to finish the rangers off and do a couple of wounds to the hammerers. And then my other pillar of fire goes through the longbeards and is able to do a couple of wounds there as well. I then unleash an absolute storm of fire. 2 great cannons with grape shot, and also my Hellblaster volley gun and my mortar go into the hammerers and completely flatten them. In fact, the only thing that is left after the smoke has cleared is just the 2 characters, one of which is on a wound. I then unleash all of my firepower from my state troops into the longbeards that are still quite a way away, and I'm able to take off a rank from there as well. And just to top it off, my handgunners are able to get another wound off the cannon, although my crossbows don't manage to kill the gyrocopter. And with that, James reached out his hand and said, "Good game, mate, but I think I'm going to concede this one." And in all honesty, I don't blame him in any way, shape, or form. The longbeards were still at least 2 turns away from being able to get into charge range, and the remaining characters from the hammerers weren't in charge range this turn. So I would have another turn to essentially pick up the 2 characters from the hammerers, and then I would also have 2 turns to basically deal with those longbeards as well. And bear in mind that the cannon was on 1 wound, and the gyrocopter was on 1 wound, and the iron drakes have been finished off by a spare bit of firepower, and there really wasn't much left in the dwarf army that was going to be able to really achieve much on the battlefield. And let me make something abundantly clear here, guys. There was no salty behavior from James at all throughout this game. He did not throw his toys out the pram when he conceded the game. He just was like, that's it. There's nothing I can do now. This game is basically over. Let's just call it, and then we can go for an early lunch. And if I'm going to be honest, this was literally the worst matchup for James, and it was the best matchup for me. In any normal circumstances, this dwarf army would have the firepower to make me come to it, but this situation, it has to march across the board, and that's just not what it wants to do. But I have to say, I felt really bad after this game because I found out that it was James's first ever tournament, and this was his first ever competitive game, and it just reminded me of those horror stories you read online where someone goes to their first event and ends up, plucking up the courage, just really hyped for it, and first round they just play into that guy. Yeah, it turns out that I was that guy. Ugh, lambast me. Lambast me down in the comment section. I have become the very thing that I swore to destroy. You either die a narrative player, or you live long enough to see yourself become an absolute cheesemonger. But good news, this may have been a bit of a rocky start to James's tournament experience, but he did go on to win his next 2 games, playing into Chaos Warriors and into Bretonnians, both of which are very, very good factions. In fact, I think James has essentially speedrun his competitive career, because not only did he play that guy, but he also then ended up submarining through the rest of the event. But with game 1 under my belt and a victory in the bag, it was time to go on to game number 2. And this was going to be a very different affair. Now, game number 2 was against Wood Elves, and I was against another chap called James. This James is everywhere. I was kind of hoping I'd get to play 3 people called James in a row, but didn't quite work out that way. But I did end up giving James a bit of a nickname, which he found hilarious, because I won't say it out here because I don't want to obviously dox him, but it turns out that he has 3 names, and all of the, first, middle, and last name, and all of them sound like first names. So from this point onwards, I will call him Old Jimmy 3 Names. In old Jimmy's list, he had a Glade Lord with the Swift Silver Shards and the Bow of Lauren and the Ruby Ring of Ruin and a Charm Shield. He also had a level 4 Wizard with the Oaken Stave using High Magic. And there was a Shadow Dancer with the Spear of Loek, a Befuddlement of Mischiefs, an Annoyance of Netlings, and Battle Magic. In the core, there was 1, 2, 3 units of Glade Guard, all with the Hagbane tips. And then there were 2 units of Deepwood Scouts. Both were 8 strong, and both had a Musician, and one of them had Hagbane tips. In fact, both of them had Hagbane tips, I should say. There's also a unit of 5 Dryads, and then in the special, there were 5 Sisters of the Thorn, 3 Treekin, 13 War Dancers, and in rare, there were 2 Great Eagles and a Tree Man. The mission we were playing was Mountain Pass. This was actually an awful mission for me in this matchup because the Wood Elves outranged me. Their bows are a 32-inch range, and my weapons are either a 24 or a 30-inch range. And if I move with my weapons, then I have -2 to hit because handguns and crossbows are cumbersome or ponderous, whichever rule it is. And also then I'll be firing at long range. So if I move, I'm hitting on 6s followed by 4s. But if the Wood Elves moves, they're just hitting on, I think, like 5s. So this was not good in the ranged war. I might have a lot more weapons than the elves, but they can just plink away from outside of my range, and because it is Mountain Pass, it might take me a little while to get up there. And sure, they can only retreat for so long, but they can retreat if they need to. Another problem my army has when facing Wood Elves is they can bring their own forest, which is more line of sight blocking terrain, which is not good for my ranged army. Things go from bad to worse for the Empire when I roll for my magic, and on the 2 wizards that have to roll for their spells, I don't get Fireball on either of them. That was huge. If I'd had triple Fireball in this army, it would have made it such a lethal game for the Wood Elves, because it means that I can just march my guys up, have my fireballs ready, and then just after a couple of turns, just basically fireball entire units of Wood Elves off the board. But we then start deploying our armies, and I just make a big line of state troops from one end of the board to the other. Starting from left to right, we have handguns, crossbows, handguns, and I have a volley gun over on the extreme right flank. And then on the hill, I have my battery o' guns with the triple cannon and the other Hellblaster volley gun, and then I put my mortar on the left flank towards the back. It's just there to stop the scouts from coming in. And then I put my wizards in a bit of a triangle formation in the middle of my deployment zone, again to stop the Deepwood Scouts from coming in. This was a mistake though. Benefit of hindsight, I should have basically had my engineers where my wizards were and had my wizards where my engineers were, because my engineers can just start away from the cannons and then just march over there and get in command range and start handing out the rerolls. But the wizards should have been behind the hills, because then they could have started moving onto the hill, and then they could have been doing Pillars of Fire and doing Fireballs whilst being screened from line of sight from the actual bulk of the war machines. The Wood Elves end up going for a very heavy deployment on the right flank. They put all of the War Dancers, all of the Treekin, the Tree Man, the Sisters of the Thorn, and the 2 units of Deepwood Scouts basically on the right flank. In the middle, they have 2 units of Glade Guard, and on the left, they have a unit of Glade Guard, and they have the Dryads, and then they have an Eagle on each flank as well. In essence, this means that about, I'd say 15 to 1600 points of the Wood Elf army is all concentrated on one flank. And essentially, it's facing down my battery of guns and 20 of my handgunners. That right flank was going to be under an insane amount of pressure, and the guns were going to have to perform if I was going to hold back the woodland sprites. But what I really needed turn 1 was to go first, because I could have targeted my cannons into the forests and essentially then bounced the cannonballs through, smashing a load of the wood elves, and then I could have also thrown my mortar over there, which, when all the wood elves are that clumped up, would have meant that I would almost have certainly have hit something, even if I scattered massively, and it just gives me that extra turn to shoot the wood elves. So naturally, I didn't get the first turn, even though I rolled a 4 with the +1. This game has had quite literally the worst possible start. Worst matchup for me, worst mission for me, bad magic, and now not getting the first turn, and making a mistake in my deployment. This was going to be a real doozy. We get into the first turn of the Wood Elves, and over on the left flank, the Eagle and the Dryads just banzai charge forward. This might seem like a bit of a one-way trip, and it is, but it's also very important, because if James does not push forward with this stuff, if old Jimmy Three Names doesn't send his guys out there to die, then it allows me to march forward with my state troops on that flank and start picking off those 5-man squads of Glade Guard at my leisure. So this keeps me busy and allows his bows to start getting to work. And oh boy, do they start working. All of the longbows go into one of my crossbow units, and they actually scythe down 12 of the lads from the unit, and I have to take a panic check, which I only just pass. And then on the right flank, everything comes barreling forward. War dancers, tree men, treekin, you name it, it was moving down that right flank, going through the double forest. But with that volley unleashed and the pressure put on, it was time for the Empire to clap back. In my first turn, I move forward on the left flank with a unit of crossbows and a unit of handguns. This allows me to see through the forest and also allows me to get into short range of the Dryads, so that even though I'm cumbersome, because I'm in short range, I'll be hitting on 6s rather than 6s followed by 4s. Everyone else essentially stays still, levels their firearms and their crossbows, and starts to unleash hell. On the left flank, I use one of the cannons that can't see anything else to go after the Great Eagle on the left flank, and I fling a cannonball into it and it dies. I then use the Hellblaster volley gun to go into the Dryads and kill 3 of them, and then I fire my handguns into the Dryads and kill the remaining 1. I could finish the Dryads off at that point with the crossbows, but I realized that the Dryads can't get to me turn 2 anyway. They can't charge me, they're out of range. And even if I don't quite kill it in my turn 2, I then get a chance to stand and shoot it. So I go with my crossbows into the Glade Guard that are on the hill and manage to kill 1 of them. But with the pressure dealt with on the left flank, it's time to go over to the most important bit, the right flank. I fire my first cannon into the tree man, and I manage to clip him, and I do 3 wounds. I then fire the second cannon into the tree man, and I manage to hit the tree man and bounce through into the tree kin. Old Jimmy Three Names doesn't make either one of his regen saves, and I manage to flatten the tree man and then also kill 1 of the tree kin. I then unleash my volley gun and my handguns, those that can see, into the treekin, and I'm able to do another 2 wounds. So there's 1 treekin alive on 1 wound, 1 treekin alive on full wounds. I also successfully cast 3 pillars of fire, and I put them in front of that right flank in front of the woods, basically making a wall of fire that the Wood Elves are going to have to go through. With the first volley of guns from the Empire unleashed, we head into Wood Elves turn 2. The Treekin and the War Dancers push forward as far as they can, and the Sisters of the Thorn and the Deepwood Scouts push into the forest but start to level their bows into my state troops in the middle. And in fact, a storm of arrows is unleashed, which successfully wipes out one of the crossbow units, and then also there's enough firepower left over to then go after one of my wizards who is exposed and kills them. That is one level 4 down and one pillar of fire dealt with. Sometimes you don't need to dispel pillar of fire. Sometimes you just kill the wizard who's casting it. There was even enough arrows left over to kill 4 of the crossbowmen from the other unit and to do a wound to one of my other level 4s as well. But even with volleys of Hagbane tips raining down amongst the state troops, the Empire strikes back. In my turn 2, I am able to use the 2 remaining pillars of fire and also the volley gun and also grape shot for one of the cannons, and also one of the cannons is firing a cannonball to wipe out the Treekin and to butcher the War Dancers down to just 4 remaining and the character. But that wasn't all. I unleashed the 3rd cannon into the forest. I am successfully able to bounce the cannonball through the woods, and I flatten the other eagle, just completely twatting it. And on the left flank, the final Dryad is gunned down by a point-blank volley of handgun shots, although the crossbows that go after the Glade Guard on the hill completely flub their attacks. But the turns are coming thick and fast now, and we get into Wood Elf 3. We start off by moving the Pillars of Fire. The first one goes through the remaining War Dancers and manages to kill 3 of them, so now there's just 1 War Dancer and the character left. The other Pillar of Fire goes through one of the Deepwood Scout units and does a lot of damage to it. Manages to get the big 6 hits, then I roll well on my wounds, and most of that unit ends up crumbling, getting turned into ash. The Wood Elves don't let any of this phase them though, and they unleash another storm of arrows into my other crossbow unit, and they kill it down to just 1 guy who amazingly manages to pass his panic test. But there was actually a smattering of melee this turn. On that right flank, the Wood Elf War Dancers skip into combat with the handgunners. Now, on my stand and shoot, I'm able to kill one of the War Dancers, meaning that just the character is left over. Now, this character's got 5 attacks hitting on 2s, and I think this is going to go very badly for me. But then old Jimmy 3 names becomes old Jimmy 3 1s. And he misses with 3 attacks hitting on 2s, and the 2 attacks that do hit only manage to kill 1 of my state troops. In return, my guys have fixed bayonets, and they actually manage to do a wound to the character in return, because she's not that durable. This means that I win combat by 4, because I've done a wound or stand and shoot, a wound in combat, I'm close order, and I've also got an extra rank. And this means that the War Dancer character actually breaks and flees because they're heavily outnumbered, and I pass my test to restrain because I don't want to get pulled forward and then potentially invite a charge from the Sisters of the Thorn on their cavalry mounts. But with the War Dancers seen off, we get into Empire turn 3, and amazingly, the right flank, the one which I thought was going to be in the most trouble, is actually pretty secure. There's not really much else over there that can threaten it. And the flank which is in the most trouble now is actually the left flank, because this is where all the bow shots are just getting poured into turn after turn after turn. Unfortunately for Empire turn 3, it's a little bit of a cold one. I'm able to gun down the War Dancer character, shooting her in the back as she runs away with my handgunners. I then fire one of my volley guns into the remaining Deepwood Scouts, and between that and the remaining Pillar of Fire, because I've lost 2 wizards at this point to all the bloody arrows, I am able to finish those off as well. I have 3 cannons, and I put all 3 of them into the Sisters of the Thorn. The first one just doesn't quite make it. I roll a 2 on the landing point and then a 2 on the bounce, and it just doesn't hit the unit. The remaining 2 actually do fantastically though, and both cannons manage to get about 8 wounds between them on the Sisters of the Thorn, because I'm hitting them in the flank, so it's the number of files that I'm going through. But they've got a 4 at ward save, and old Jimmy, 3 names, becomes old Jimmy past many ward saves, because I only managed to kill, I think, like 1 or maybe 2 of them with 8 cannon wounds. But now it's time for the pointy ears to keep putting on the pain, and they are able to unleash a bunch of arrows and spells into one of my handgunner units, the one on the left, and they manage to kill 7 from the unit. But then the Glade Guard go after my Hellblaster volley gun that's on the hill, and they easily kill it because they've got Hagbane tips. It means that they're just fishing for 6s to hit to wound me, and I haven't got a save because I'm a war machine. And this makes it very obvious to me how at risk my war machines are to Wood Elf longbows. With a quick Wood Elf 4, it's time for Empire 4, and I have a little think. Because I realise now that the only units that are really left for me to engage with are the Sisters of the Thorn, who I might be able to kill over the course of the game, but they're only worth like 150 points. And then you've got the Glade Guard units, which are worth like 65 points each. And the one unit that's worth anything is the Deepwood Scouts with the 2 characters attached to it. But that thing keeps getting the ethereal spell off, and I don't really have any way of dispelling that meaningfully. And so I realized that if I just stay on that hill, all I'm going to do is give the Wood Elves 120 points plus every single turn as they just riddle my war machines with poison arrows. And my war machines can't really do much back to them, because the only thing that could shoot at the Glade Guard are going to be my cannons. My Hellblaster volley gun's not going to be in range. And they're going to kill, if I'm lucky, 3 a turn. That's not a good trade. That's not a good trade at all. So my turn 4, I decide that discretion is the better part of valor, and I take all of my war machines and I just move them off the hill. I do a smattering of damage to the Sisters of the Thorn, managing to kill 1 of them with my handgunners on the right, but really that's about it. And I start retreating my units back, trying to minimize the amount of damage that the Wood Elves can do. And over the course of Wood Elf turn 5 and turn 6, they put as much firepower as possible into my left flank. They want to try and finish off that lone crossbow sergeant who's still walking around, and they're trying to go for the remaining level 4, and they're trying to go for the handgun unit on that flank. If they manage to get all 3 of those units, they will actually be able to force a draw. Unfortunately, because I'm now using the forests against the Wood Elves, how ironic, the only unit that can really draw line of sight to them is the mega blob of Deepwood Scouts with the 2 characters. And over a couple of turns, that unit does manage to wipe out the unit of handgunners, but the lone crossbow sergeant somehow manages to survive. He just takes a storm of arrows and just somehow survives it. It's amazing. And then the wizard is able to also survive with just, I think, like 1 wound remaining. It was very touch and go. Because of this and the fact that I'm able to kill all but 1 of the Sisters of the Thorn, the end result is that the Wood Elves scored about 800 points, but the Empire were able to get about 1,100 victory points. So another victory in the bag, but it was only possible due to extreme cowardice. I know a lot of people are going to see that retreat over the course of turn 4, turn 5, turn 6 as dishonorable and not fighting like a true Empire player. But here's the thing. There is this natural inclination with a lot of players to never move your war machines. They stay there and they just keep firing and firing and firing. But you have to identify the point when they've killed everything they're realistically going to kill, and you have to identify that point when you're getting diminishing returns from them. This is something that I've only recently started doing as an Empire player, And often I would leave my war machines out and just end up giving the points up, and it would cost me games. And now, if my cannons have killed all the big stuff and it's unlikely they're going to get to grapes or anything, I will often just retreat them away and save their points. Another example of this is I stopped firing my mortar. I just didn't fire it over round 4, round 5, round 6 because I didn't want to risk it misfiring and blowing up and giving my opponent 100 points. And at the end of the day, the law for my army is they are a mercenary company. They are Vossenberg's vagabonds. And so really, I have no qualms with playing a little bit dishonorably because at the end of the day, when you're a mercenary, you can't get paid if you're dead. But one last serious point to make before we go on to game number 3 is Wood Elves are really strong. The fact that their infantry essentially outshot my infantry and I had more than double the models is really a testament to how good they are at shooting. I truly believe that if old Jimmy 3 Names had basically done what I had done but with Wood Elves and just gone full shooting, full poison all of the way, focused on magic and just essentially tried to blast people off the board, if he had done that, he would have won this game hands down, no questions asked. Elf shooting is absolutely lethal, and if you encounter it, be prepared for a hell of a game. So here we are, round 3, and we're playing on top table thanks to the 2 victories we've got in the bag. And I end up getting paired into Ed and his Tomb Kings. Any of you who have watched my tournament reports before will be eminently familiar with Ed. He is a really good old world player, and he's actually beaten me pretty handily in the past, last time that we faced off my empire versus his Tomb Kings. And this time, Ed had an even spicier list than the last time that we faced. Last time he had one Necrosphinx that basically just passed all its regens and just flattened me. But now he's got 2 big boys. He's got a Necrosphinx and he's got a King on Dragon. And this King has got a 4-up armor, a 5-up ward, and a 5-up regen. And because it's on the Dragon, it's innately -1 to hit from all of my ballistic skill based shooting, which is going to make it really hard to deal with. He's also got 2 units of chariots in the army, 2 blocks of skeletons, 1 melee with a banner bearer in it, the magical banner bearer like the BSB, and the other one is ranged with a level 1 wizard in there who is giving them all poison shots. More poison bow shots, I know. We've also got a level 4 Hierophant in there, and we have got the Casket of Souls, and we have got the Screaming Skull Catapult, and 2 Tomb Scorpions. The mission for the final game was the Lonely Tower. He who controlled the tower would get an extra 200 victory points at the end of the game. For deployment, I went for my big long line of state troops, and I had handgunners on the left flank, followed by crossbowmen, followed by handgunners, followed by crossbowmen. I then had my mortar in the back left corner to stop any nasty Tomb Scorpions from doing nasty things, and then I had 3 cannons and a Hellblaster volley gun on the hill, and I had one of my mages on the hill as well, and then I had 2 mages just off the hill, sort of in between a unit of crossbowmen and a unit of handgunners, and then I had a Hellblaster volley gun with slap bang in the middle between a unit of handgunners and a unit of crossbowmen. I did make a slight mistake in my deployment. I should have had both handgun units on the left-hand side. The reason for this is they needed to start slightly deployed on the hill anyway, and they would have been in the way of my artillery. So because I would have had to move them anyway, I might as well had both handgun units over there, because if I get first turn, they wouldn't have been in range, so they would have had to move forward anyway, and if I get second turn, they're moving forward anyway just to make room for the cannons. That way I could have had both of my crossbow units stay still at the start of the game, and they would have been able to shoot a little bit better. It's a very, very minor point. The only reason I'm highlighting it is, guys, don't deploy in autopilot. Don't just go 1, 2, 1, 2. Have a look at what units are going where, and that way you can get that little bit more efficiency out of them. As for the Tomb Kings, Ed put one of his Tomb Scorpions in reserve, and then he had the other one starting on the board on the left flank. Also on the left flank, we had a unit of chariots, the Tomb King on the dragon, and the Necrosphinx. In the middle, we had both Skelly Blobs, the Casket, and the Screaming Skull Catapult. And then on the extreme right flank, we had a unit of chariots. We roll off to see who gets the first turn, and Sigmar be praised, Skinwalker Mordian was in command, and we got the first turn. This was huge. This was really, really, really important, because if I get first turn, it means I get an extra turn to unleash my cannons into his big nasty pasties. And that is exactly what I do. I move my 2 state troop units forward a little bit just to get them off the hill and out of the way of my artillery park. And then I just start banging out cannonballs left, right, and center. First cannon goes into the Necrosphinx, gets the hit, gets the wound, gets through the regen, and does 3 wounds. Second cannon gets the hit, gets the wound, but the regen blocks it. Third cannonball gets the hit, gets the wound, and gets through the regen, and I roll a big fat 6, doing a total of 4 more damage to it, bringing the Necrosphinx down in 1 volley. God, I love great cannons. But it wasn't over yet. My Hellblaster volley gun was able to go into the Tomb Scorpion that had started on the board because it had a Vanguard move, and it unleashed a storm of fire and was able to scythe down the Tomb Scorpion fairly easily. I think it might have needed a bit of support from a fireball here and a volley of handgun shots there, but that Tomb Scorpion went down toot sweet. Last thing to say is I unloaded my handguns on the left into the chariots and did a wound. I unloaded my crossbows on the far right into the other chariots and did a wound. And then I unloaded my unit of crossbowmen into the Tomb King and was able to do a wound. But that wound came back because he was able to arise. So with both chariot units wounded and a Tomb Scorpion and Necrosphinx gone back to the sand, it was time for the Tomb Kings to spring into action. Or should I say sort of march forward in perfect unison into action. Turn 1, Tomb Kings and the chariots come down the left flank. The chariots come down the right flank. The dragon goes forward super fast. It does end up landing on my pillars of fire, but because it's in his turn, not in my turn, because I've not had a chance to move around yet, I should say. He only has to take a dangerous terrain test, which he passes. And then the skeleton archers with bows are able to fire into my crossbows, and they actually kill 6 of them. Damn those poison shots. Screaming Skull Catapult misfires, can't fire for 2 turns. And then the skeleton warriors, I say march, they might will be done forward a bit. And they manage to start going towards the tower. And that's really it. A smattering of damage from the archers. I think the skeleton chariots managed to kill 1 crossbowman on the right flank. But that was about it. Now it's time for Empire turn 2. And I need to kill that dragon. If I don't kill that dragon, I am in for a really, really bad time. I start off by moving both pillars of fire through the dragon and through the unit of chariots on the left flank. And fortunately, I am able to actually wipe the chariots out with the pillars of fire. I just get to roll pretty luckily on the number of hits and stuff. And then I do no damage to the Tomb King. This is a little bit of an omen for what's about to come. But no matter, I think to myself, why would trust in magic when you can trust in firepower? And the cannon battery goes bang, bang, bang. If it's done it to a Necrosphinx, we can do it to a Tomb King. First cannon hits, wounds. Ed passes the 5-up ward save. Second cannon hits, wounds. Ed fails the ward save, but passes the regen. Uh-oh. Spaghetti-o. I fire the third cannon. It hits. And it rolls a 1 to wound. No! Damn. So now it's going to come down to Hellblaster volley guns. I got 2 Hellblaster volley guns, and I've got a unit of handgunners, a unit of crossbowmen, 3 fireballs that can go into this thing, and I've also got another unit of handgunners, but they are going to be hitting on like 6s followed by 4s because of this -1. They've had to swing round to draw line of sight. What's crazy though is all of those small arms, those units get to fire with both ranks because it's a large target, so the second rank can see as well. I think that was clarified in the FAQ. So I unleash with the first Hellblaster volley gun. I roll a misfire. That's okay, I'll engineer reroll it. I roll another misfire. That's okay, it'll just be hitting at -1. I roll the second dice. It's a misfire. Oh no. My only hope at this point is to roll a third misfire and hope to God that I get all 30 shots into this thing. No, I don't. I don't roll a misfire. I roll like a 2 or a 4 or something. And my Hellblast volley gun then rolls on the black power table and, of course, blows itself up. Brilliant. The second Hellblaster volley gun unleashes into the dragon, but just doesn't get a lot of shots. It's like 10 shots with a misfire involved, which I had to re-roll. So I'm hitting on like long range plus the cloud of dust from the dragon, hitting on 6s. Even with Curse of Our Attraction, I get 1 wound through. I'm lucky to get that wound through as well. I then fire a unit of handguns at the dragon, and I'm able to take a wound off it. I then fire a unit of crossbows at the dragon, don't do any wounds to it. I then fire 3 fireballs into the dragon, but 2 of them fail to cast. The third one does go off, and I manage to do a single wound to the dragon. And once I have unleashed dozens of handgun shots, crossbow bolts, triple cannon, double volley gun, everything, double pillar of fire, I've done 3 wounds to this thing. Oh no. Oh, not like this. Oh. This was bad. But it wasn't all bad. Over on the right flank, my other crossbow unit unleashed a volley of close range bolts into the skeleton chariots that were bearing down on them, and amazingly managed to wipe them out. Now it is amazing because I only had 12 shots and that unit still had 5 wounds left. But between the fact that I was hitting on 4s, plus I had reroll 1s from another Curse of Our Attraction, and the fact that I rolled like a fiend on the to wounds, getting a lot of armor bane through on the crossbows and the repeater handgun, meant that they just went down. And Ed didn't roll any 6s for his regen, and they were just wiped out. I think if I hadn't wiped them out, there's a good chance I still potentially could have got them on the stand and shoot, and maybe on the combat, but hey, it's one less thing to worry about, and I'm glad that I didn't have to find out. But I can't put it off any longer. I've got to hand over to Tomb King turn 2. I don't want to, because I know what's coming. It's dragon time. This turn is really all about the dragon. Just to briefly cover what happened elsewhere, the archers unleashed a few shots, did a couple of wounds, and the other unit of skeletons just walked forward bit by bit until they touched the tower to get the extra 200 points. And the Screaming Skull Catapult was still out of action this turn. And the Casket of Souls, I think it tried to do like a laser beam kind of spell, like the Light of Death, but it didn't quite go off. So then we get to the dragon. It goes straight into the crossbowmen, munches them down to just 10 survivors. They break, but they fall back in good order. They bounce through the mage and the cannons. I'm very, very fortunate that I passed my panic tests. I am on leadership 8 because my general is nearby, and I just very fortunately passed them. I fall back and go, I bounce through, but I don't quite bounce off the table, fortunately. So those crossbow will get a chance to come back and redeem themselves. But the dragon then overruns into my level 4 mage that's behind. Big oof. So with a giant undead bone dragon now rampaging through my lines and breaking through into my artillery pack, we go into Empire turn 3. And I have to say, I don't have a great one. It's a little bit of a stinker. We get what we want, but it takes a hell of an effort to get there. The first thing that I do is move my cannons out of the way. I just move. There's no point in standing there and just letting the bone dragon just start munch through all of my cannons. I know it's going to break through and overrun into 2 cannons if I don't move them. So what I do is I take 2 cannons that are on the left of the hill and I just move them down. And I move my engineer over there, and I just essentially redress the ranks with my crossbowmen and just have them get out of the way. I do actually end up leaving one cannon in the way because I really want that cannon to shoot this turn, and I'm willing to accept the fact that it will die, but that it will get to shoot. I also don't want Ed to have nothing in front of him, nothing tempting him forward, because if he kills the wizard in my turn 3 and there's nothing in front of him, he'll just test to restrain and then in his turn start flying off and doing all sorts of damage and getting in amongst my lines. If there's a cannon in front of him, it kind of acts as bait and it tempts him forward to continue to overrun, and that lets me sort of handle him for another turn. I'm willing to basically sacrifice a few units to keep the dragon busy whilst I kill everything around it. I then proceed to unload the Hellblaster volley gun. Now, I must correct a mistake I made in turn 2. I said that my Hellblaster volley gun blew itself up going after the Bone Dragon. I've just realised now that my Hellblaster volley gun did blow itself up, but it blew itself up going into the Tomb Scorpion. In turn 2, it just rolled a really poor number of shots and didn't do anything to the Bone Dragon. But either way, it's blown up now. So now I've got to use my cannon against this Tomb Scorpion, and I don't want to use my cannon against it because I want to use my cannon against the Screaming Skull Catapult because that thing's going to be back in action next turn. But I fire my cannon into it and I'm able to get the hit, get the wound, and then it passes the 6-up regen. So it lives. So this thing's on 1 wound at the moment. It's taken a wound from the handgunners, it's taken a wound from a fireball from one of the mages. But if I don't kill it, it's going to be a real problem because it's actually, I thought it had a 5-inch move, but it's got a 7-inch move. So it's actually within the standard shoot range of my handgunners. So I go for a desperate measure. This is not just the saga of the Tomb Scorpion. This is the redemption of the mortar. I fire my mortar danger close into the Tomb Scorpion. Now my mortar has not really been mentioned much through this tournament. Game 1, it killed 1 Longbeard. Game 2, it did nothing. It scattered the 2 times I shot it, and I didn't fire it the rest of the game because I didn't want it to blow up and give the enemy points. But this game, it's been on fire. It's actually, over the first few turns, been flattening the archers, but unfortunately, they just keep getting back up with a rise. But now I go for a shot onto the Tomb Scorpion, because if I don't scatter too far, then I can get the small hole over the base of the Scorpion, and that means I get to do the big strength 6 hit against it. If I fire it, I get a direct hit. I then roll the the artillery dice, and I get a 2. So because I got a direct hit, and then I rolled a 2, I basically don't scatter, because I get to subtract my ballistic skill in that situation, even with bombardment. And I get the wound. I get the wound on a 6, which means Ed gets no armor save on this thing. He rolls his regen. He doesn't pass it. And the mortar kills something, and it kills something meaningful and very, very much saves my ass. I personally believe they didn't load a mortar shell into this thing. I personally believe they just loaded a regular cannonball into it, and I didn't explode the Scorpion. Rather, I just brained it by a lump of metal just falling from the sky and absolutely crushing it. But at the end of my turn 3, the Bone Dragon kills the mage that it had overrun into, and then it overruns into the cannon that I had left as bait. But then we get to go into the Tomb King turn 3. Now, to be honest, not a lot happens in this turn. With the chariots down, the Necrosphinx down, and the dragon already engaged in combat, the only real things that happen is the skeletons finally slowly march to the tower and get into base contact with it, meaning they're going to get that 200 points as I can get something into base contact with the tower. And then the archers fire into my handgunners and manage to kill 4 of them. And the Screaming Skull Catapult fires and scatters off massively and doesn't hit anything. It's not done very well, the Screaming Skull Catapult, unfortunately. The Bone Dragon then munches on the cannon, and for a brief moment, Ed's like, I think I'll test to restrain. And I say to him, bro, I do not want to tell you what to do, but we're mates and we've played before. But if you don't overrun with that bone dragon, it's going to get shot by everything. Because I had lined up a lot of my infantry in a position where I'm going to be able to hit it with cannon, triple fireball, and I'm going to be able to hit it with a Hellblaster volley gun, and I'm going to hit it with crossbows, and I'll just be able to hit it with all of my other units as well, which most of them will be, yeah, sure, they'll probably be hitting on like 6 followed by 4s, but it's just a lot of firepower, and Ed got kind of lucky last time. This time it could be really, really bad. So he's like, yeah, I don't think I'll stay on the hill. I didn't say all of that to him. I didn't go into as much detail. I literally went, I will just shoot you with everything. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm going to go off. So he overruns off the board. And so that is the Tomb King turn 3. We get to Empire turn 4. And things are looking good, but it's still very close. The Bone Dragon now, I don't really need to worry about it as much, because it's going to come back turn 4, and then it's going to not be able to get me until turn 5. So it can munch 2 more units. Turn 5, turn 6 is going to be munching. For me, I want to just pick up whatever points I can get. The Bone Dragon's going to be munching. I have to kill everything else. So my turn 4, I put both cannons into the Screaming Skull catapult, and I also managed to get a pillar of fire through the skeletons and the Casket of Souls and the Screaming Skull catapult, and that allows me to kill the Screaming Skull catapult and a whole bunch of skeletons as well. But the big thing was the second pillar of fire. This was the only thing that really happened this turn, but it was huge. I roll my second pillar of fire, and I managed to get a 6 on the roll to see where it gets to move to, how far it gets to move. And this allows me to just about touch the Hierophant. Now, I then roll 4 hits on the Hierophant. I have to wound it on 5s. I get 3 5s. Ed doesn't get a regen because of dry as dust, but he does have a 5-up ward. He passes, one of the 5-up wards taking 2 damage. But on a 4+, he then takes another wound. I roll the dice, I get the 4+. I think I roll 2 dice and I get 2 4+s, and the Hierophant goes down. This is absolutely huge. With the Hierophant down, it means that the army is going to start to crumble, but most importantly, the regen saves for the army get turned off. That is the primary defense mechanism of the Tomb Kings, and it has just gone. And in all honesty, with the Hierophant going down, that does spell the end of the game for the Tomb Kings. That's a huge amount of points for me. And also getting the Screaming Skull catapult is another big glut of points. And in fact, all that the Tomb Kings have got left at that point is a couple of skelly blobs, which aren't very points dense. They've got the Casket of Souls, I guess, but it's not doing much. And then they've got the dragon. And the dragon comes back on the Tomb King turn 4, breathes on a bunch of handgunners, and then I shoot the crap out of it, because now it's not got regen, it's a lot easier to handle. And it goes down to 1 wound. It goes on to 1 wound. And so we do turn 5 for the Tomb Kings, and the dragon eats a Hellblaster volley gun. And then the TO says, that's dice down. Ed and I do have a little think, could we talk it out? But to be fair, with it being the last round, everyone else's games is finished. We're like, no, we'll just dice down because I don't think it'll make a difference. The only thing that might have happened is in my turn 6, I kill the dragon, which would have just been more points for the Empire. As it was, the game ends up being pretty close because the Tomb Kings do have control of the tower and the Empire don't. But the final score is about 900 points to the Empire and about 600 points, including the tower, to the Tomb Kings. So quick lessons learned from that game. Firstly, the Bone Dragon is phenomenal. Really powerful unit, and it was doing so much work. I have learned to respect that thing. I think it made a big difference having the king on top of it, you know. That made it just feel a lot more punchy. And maybe having the mage on top would have been better, let the dragon do most of the work, but still, one way or another, that Bone Dragon is a really good unit. If you face off against one of the things, be prepared for it to be a hard kill. The other big thing is Pillar of Fire. I think it's kind of broken. It's kind of overpowered. No other spell in the game would have allowed me to do what I did. And it was pretty good in every single game. But in this last game, it just won me the match. No argument whatsoever. But with 3 games down, we get to the end of the tournament. And after all the dust had settled and the smoke had cleared, I'd only gone and bloody done it. I'd got 3 victories. And I'd gone and won the event. A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one. I was not expecting to win with this list. I thought it was far too one-dimensional. I thought that the moment I come across some kind of fast-moving army, it's gonna just fall apart completely. I thought the moment I face against Wood Elves, I'm just gonna be in trouble. But it managed to take on everything. It took on Wood Elves with the worst possible start, and it even took on the Tomb King, which you might think is not a fast-moving army, but between those chariots and the flying Necrosphinx and the flying Bone Dragon, they can be surprisingly quick. I've learned to not believe the internet when they say Tomb Kings are a slow army. They are not. But focusing on the army for a moment, I have to say it's nice for Empire to have something powerful. At the beginning of Old World, a lot of people, including myself, were kind of down on the power of the faction. We loved the aesthetic, we loved that Old World was back, but Empire just felt very weak. Kind of felt like we were the sick man of Old World. But with this list, you feel really powerful. It is a real trip. However, with all of that said, I don't think I'll be running this list again for a little while. And the big reason for that is I play Old World for fun. If I want to play Cutthroat competitive, I'll play 40k. But if I want to have a bit of fun, embrace the narrative, and see some cool armies and have some epic moments, then I play Old World. At the end of the day, this list is just filthy. I felt physically dirty at the end of each game. It's just too cheesy for me. I want to play Old World where I can bring my narrative armies, bring in units that I don't normally take, and just throw some dice, have a good time. And if I win, I win. And if I lose, I lose. It doesn't matter. Maybe this is just power that man was not meant to have. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Is the Gunline too cheesy, too powerful, or is it our answer to this competitive Old World meta? Also, if there's any other factions or army lists that you want me to take to a tournament, let me know and I'll see what I can do about putting the army together, whether it's for Empire or for another faction. And if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button. And if you want to see more content like this, then subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members, and Patreons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.